Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk again about Doctor Strange, but I know I've been doing a lot of that lately, so I kind of wanted to look at it from another angle, and I wanted to talk about how to, if at all possible, counter Doctor Strange. Now, at the onset, I want to say that, of course, all of these strategies and all of these ideas are still very new. Most of them are not mine. There's ones that I saw from the community, but some are ones that I experienced while playing, mostly playing as Doctor Strange and getting beaten and then being surprised by getting beaten and then having to figure out why I got beaten. But also against other Doctor Stranges who had a better team setup than I did, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. But I also do want to say at the onset that Doctor Strange is still a fucking powerhouse. He's still a monster character, and you shouldn't take this video or take any of my suggestions as any kind of deterrent from investing in Doctor Strange. If you are at all invested in this game and you've been working towards a character like Proxima or Thanos and you're thinking about switching over to Doctor Strange, I highly recommend that you do that, and you can take some of my other videos like Thanos versus Doctor Strange, etc., etc. You can take that more into consideration and kind of count that as my opinion or my suggestion or advice for you. This video I just felt was interesting to me for a couple of reasons, and that's why I wanted to make it. So, why is Doctor Strange getting his own video on how to counter him? Well, as I said, he's fucking broken as shit. He's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful character in the game, bar none, as of this moment. And guys, keep in mind the character is still very new. He has not been, really developed by the community, and all of the best practices and best strategies for this character have not yet been fleshed out. So there is still a lot of room for the character to grow. Of course, there is the low but still possible probability, or possibility, I guess, possible possibility that Doctor Strange will get nerfed or changed in some way to make him a little bit more in line with other characters. I'm not, I don't think that's going to happen, but it's possible, so we can't rule it out at all. So I just want to show you guys here with a timeline battle. One of the most powerful effects that Doctor Strange has is the freeze effect. So as you can see here, guys, Wiccan just got frozen mid animation, and this is his tier 2 passive. But of course, it comes as soon as you get the character because he comes like ready with his tier 2 ability. So it's not like it's something you need to invest in later on. And it triggers when you're attacking, so it's very easy to proc, and it triggers when he's a striker for World Boss. You don't even need to be using Doctor Strange specifically. His freeze applies to World Bosses, okay? And so the freeze, I mean, of course Doctor Strange does great damage. Yes, he has lots of iframe abilities. He's got a heal with his uniform. I mean, he's basically got it all. High DPS, great leadership, iframes, heal. But it's really the tier 2 passive that takes things up another notch. His 4-star passive is also very, very strong against meta-defining characters like Loki, Silk, Shirog, Sharon Rogers for the uninitiated. But it's really his tier 2 passive, 75% rate when attacking. You freeze the character for 4 seconds, and it's got only a 12-second cooldown. So that can proc multiple times during a timeline battle. That will proc multiple times during a world boss if they don't die within, fucking 12 seconds. And overall, this is the biggest reason why the character is so dominant, and it actually is what has precipitated or forced the community to look for ways of stopping him. Now keep in mind, of course, the ways of stopping him, this quote-unquote countering strategy, is only useful for Timeline, Shadowland, King of the Hill, Battle World, and Alliance tournaments. In any other game mode, it's all player versus environment, so it's really not important and not at all something that you should care about. And as well, guys, a lot of people don't really give a shit about Timeline, Battle World, or King of the Hill, so it's really probably most useful in Alliance tournaments, and I'm sure that those players already know what to do. They don't really need this, hopefully. But anyways, I thought it's still an interesting topic to cover, so I wanted to get into how to basically counter that passive, because that's where That's the big strength of Doctor Strange. It's important when you're figuring out how to counter a character to figure out what it is about the character that you need to counter. Is it Groot's heal and his massive defense? Is it Ant-Man's guaranteed dodge? And then from there, it becomes a much simpler, game of match my strength to your weakness. So we want to find characters that have debuff procs, because this what I should say is actually removal of debuff procs, because this time freeze is a debuff. It's an effect that's applied, and it's a negative effect, so it's referred to as a debuff. So it's also something that will get applied to by stuff like crowd control. It's also a CC skill. It's both of those things. So in a very small way, a leadership like Moon Knight, this 24% crowd control time down, will reduce those 4 seconds of freeze to whatever, 3 point something second. But that's really not good enough. You're frozen for 3 seconds, you're fucking dead. End of story. You should get fitted for that coffin real soon, brother, because you're fucking done. So you need characters that remove debuffs. So right off the top, we have a character like we have fucking this character, Supergiant. Her leadership applies to all her team members when she's the leader, and when you get debuffed, it removes the debuff for 20 seconds, and it has a cooldown time of 25 seconds. So that's a pretty strong leadership, and it will be handy against a character like specifically Doctor Strange. Now, of course, that is one that you'd be using by foregoing a damage leadership, so that will affect your DPS. But if you're really getting crushed and spanked by Doctor Strange, that is one route to go. But of course, Supergiant is a world boss character. She's a Black Order character. She takes a lot of resources to get, and you're probably not going to invest in her as your first world boss, as your first Black Order character, just to try and maybe counter Doctor Strange maybe like 40% of the time. It's not even like you're going to counter him 100% of the time, because he might still kill you, and you might not be able to kill him fast enough with your other skills, even though he can still continue to use his other skills. So that's one option. Another option along the same vein is Malekith. As you can see from his leadership, he's got basically the same one, except it has a longer cooldown. So his applies to all team members. When you're debuffed, you get a huge energy defense bonus, and it removes the debuff. So that's pretty useful. The 40-second cooldown is bad. You're basically never going to proc that more than once in a PvP fight, but it does give you the 30% energy defense, which is really strong against Doctor Strange, because we know he does energy damage. Another candidate for this leadership quality, or sorry, not leadership, passive quality. So this is only for himself now. We're getting a little bit more specific. When he's debuffed, so if he gets frozen, it removes the debuff on a 30-second cooldown. That's really bad, and Black Bolt doesn't have his tier 2, and Black Bolt isn't even in the realm of countering Doctor Strange. So this is probably the longest shot by far, but it's worth noting for what I'm going to get into a little bit later in the video. Then we have probably the favorite of all of the ones I'm going to talk about today, and this is Wasp. And Wasp actually has 2 ways of stopping Doctor Strange, in a sense. So she has 3, I guess. Oh, actually, you know what? I think the barrier doesn't work. Actually, I'm not sure if it works. That would be an interesting thing to test. But I know for sure that her Winsome Wasp is probably the most popular way of countering Doctor Strange right now. And basically, when you get debuffs, you remove all the debuffs, and it's got a 25-second cooldown. So this one is very strong because it's basically giving you Supergiant's leadership, but Wasp neither has to be the leader. She just has to be in your party. So even though her leadership is not bad, you can take advantage of a stronger leadership, have her in your party, and still get that advantage, which is huge, especially in a Doctor Strange versus Doctor Strange fight, because usually the first Doctor to get frozen is the first one to die, very simply put. So that would be very, very powerful, and that's why you see a lot of Alliance Tournaments teams, and why if you're in Vibranium League and you get up to 79 points, you do start to see a lot of teams. Whoops. When you go into timeline battle and you get up to 79 points, you're gonna start to see a lot of teams consist of like Thanos, someone else, and Wasp. Right there, that's one example. I've seen a lot of Thanos, Doctor Strange, Wasp. I'm seeing a lot of that, guys. Let's see if we can roll one here really quickly. But so that's basically the reason why Wasp is not really there. That's another variation on the team. Wasp is there primarily for the leadership. She can also cheese out some wins with spamming the 6-star skill, but it's that tier 2 passive that's so useful and just got a huge bump in its usefulness because of this new Doctor Strange meta that we're seeing happen in the game. I think that's it for characters that have debuff potential. I might be missing one, but it's not too important. Also to note, Wasp has one other way of dealing with Doctor Strange directly, but that's one-on-one battling. She can't be on the team. She has to be the active character, and that's with the paralyzing sting, where she applies a silence. The silence won't help you against the freeze, but the time freeze, but it'll help you against his other skills, and it will lower his DPS and his iframes to 0, or it'll lower his DPS considerably for the time being. Another good choice for that would obviously be Wiccan, with his silence on his passive, which is pretty strong. But again, you have to manually play, you have to dodge the time freeze, and then you have to actually get the Dispel Zone buff or debuff off. And you have to be fighting against the Doctor Strange that doesn't have their own debuffer on their team. Because, you know, if your Doctor Strange has Wasp, but their Doctor Strange has Wasp, then you're going to both freeze each other, get released from your freeze because of the debuff trigger rate on Wasp, and then it's just going to be a regular DPS battle. So those are the primary targets or recipients that have gotten a little bit of a bump in usability because of this Doctor Strange update. But there are a few more that I want to talk about, mainly the spiders. Now the spiders are, you know, Silk, Spider-Man tier 2 with the Civil War uniform, tier 2 Miles Morales, for example, tier 2 Gwen, Spider-Gwen. Those are the spiders that I'm talking about, not Superior Spider-Man. Sorry, bro, you don't get included in this list. I'm just talking about primarily those 4 spiders. And the reason why I bring them up, mostly I'm bringing up tier 2 Spider-Man with the Civil War uniform, because it gives him additional time on his webbing. He gets a web effect on the spider kick skill, and his normal web blast lasts longer. It webs for more time. And so when you're playing him manually, and if you get really lucky in autoplay, you can kind of perpetually web the Doctor Strange up, and you have the type advantage being speed versus blast, so you're going to do more damage, and then you can CC their Doctor Strange and counter him that way. Again, if you get frozen, you're probably going to die, period. So you have to avoid that as well, but it's just another way of looking at trying to counter who is probably the most meta-defining character in the game at the moment and for the time being. So that's another important thing to consider and to think about if you're doing a lot of PvP and you're finding yourself getting fucking rocked by Doctor Strange. The problem here is that it relies on their Doctor Strange not having the same things that your Doctor Strange will have to counter another Doctor Strange. And I know that sounds really wordy and stupid, but basically, you know, webbing is a CC effect. So if their Doctor Strange has debuff removal from like a tier 2 Wasp, or if their Doctor Strange has a web resist obelisk, then you're fucking screwed. You kiss your ass goodbye. You're out of luck. So it's not really a hard counter. It's kind of a soft counter that relies on other variables not being present to work, but it has some success. I have experienced losses against both tier 2 Spider-Man. I did suffer one loss, I believe, on stream with my Doctor Strange, and I did lose against another Doctor Strange team that I foolishly fought that had Thanos and Wasp. I went into the fight not realizing why Wasp was there, and then my freeze got debuffed, and then his Doctor Strange just rocked my ass. So it's not a foolproof strategy, of course, but it's just something to think about. But this brings me to my final point for this video today, guys, and that's the balance and counterbalance and rebalance of characters based on new characters. So a big argument in the game and a big, you know, kind of complaint or nitpick of the game is that characters are imbalanced. Obviously, you take a character like Doctor Strange, you compare him to a character like, oh, I don't know, let's say Elektra, and there's no question, you know, in anyone's mind that Doctor Strange is infinitely better, or as close to infinitely as possible, better than Elektra. But what is interesting and what is good for the game, and it's something that Netmarble can continue to do with some creativity, but it doesn't require actually rebalancing characters and new patches, and like admitting that they made mistakes or whatever, is by introducing characters that counter each other in kind of a, I don't want to liken it to rock, scissors, papers match, because I think it's a little bit more complex than that, but kind of like a chess game, guys, kind of like in card games. I've said this before, where aggro counters control, combo counters, wait, fucking, I don't know. Anyways, aggro counters control, counters combo, combo counters aggro, aggro counters control, something like that. Anyways, guys, it's kind of like that. So you have characters like Shirog, who were very defensive, very tanky, and would just absorb a bunch of damage and then blast it out. Now you have characters coming in like Doctor Strange, who don't do, I mean, they do a lot of burst damage, don't get me wrong, but instead of having the damage being output in a sort of like turtle up and then release fashion, it's more like I'm gonna stop you from moving, I'm gonna freeze you, I'm gonna control your character, and then I'm just gonna chip you down until you're dead and debuff you and just hit you with all these status effects. You have other characters who revive, you have characters who, you know, become basically unhittable for a period of time, or they have very, very long iframes where they can do chip damage. You have characters who heal for gross amounts, you know, kind of perpetually, so they can keep bouncing. As long as they don't get bursted down in one shot, they can keep bouncing around between low and high HP. You have characters that add like slow dot effects. You have clones. You have, you know, paralyze effects. You have team buffs with tier 2s. You have webbing, CC, all that stuff. And so all of these different ways of dealing damage and defending and whatever, all that stuff, like healing, iframes, all that stuff, guys. This is all kind of swirling together in a fucking giant whirlpool, and whichever one is the strongest at the time is going to take hold and be the biggest target for how do we, you know, fuck this specific situation up. We want to break the meta. We don't want to keep getting, you know, pounded by this particular strategy, even though it might be the most effective or the easiest to pull off. Let's try to change it. So, you know, Loki was super popular for a long time in a lot of arena and PvP stuff, and so people started looking, for example, into lots of multi-hit skills. This is before we had stuff that had pierce, and this is before we had like debuffs for Loki's shield. So instead, you want to look for someone who can either CC Loki with like a fear effect or a stun effect, or a character that has lots of multi-hit skills to break that shield quickly, because even though each skill individually, like each hit of the skill doesn't do much damage, it will crack the barrier quickly, and then you can start DPSing with other skills that your character has. So, you know, it's very interesting to me seeing this kind of play out in real time. You know, Doctor Strange gets added, everyone freaks the fuck out, everyone starts to get used to the character and how the character plays out, and then they pin the strongest strength of the character down to try and exploit a weakness or at least a counter. And this is kind of how metas are created and how they evolve and change over time. And so it's something that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention if you haven't noticed, and if you have, you know, to open up a deeper discussion about it, because I do think it's really interesting. There are metas that we haven't really experienced yet that have footing in the game to take hold, like, you know, elemental damage meta, where certain characters who do like all fire damage or whatever can do like disgusting damage, and then you'd have to gear your characters or your squad for resistances, for example. That's something we've never really seen before. So there's still a lot of room for this kind of stuff to grow. And as an aside note, on a personal note, I do wish that that leaderships like Moon Knights were more useful in this situation, because I feel like this crowd control, this is what CC stands for, guys, for the umpteenth time. This crowd control down leadership is basically the point of countering characters like Doctor Strange, but I feel like the 24% that we have on characters like Moon Knight, on characters like Venom, is not enough. And while Moon Knight doesn't need the leadership to be relevant, Venom definitely does, even with his tier 2. So it would have been nice in hindsight to have had those leaderships play a larger role in this new meta. Unfortunately, they don't, for whatever reason. Netmarble, you know, didn't want that to be the case, and that's fine. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention, guys. Give you some tips. Of course, if you're struggling against Doctor Strange in timeline battle, you should probably avoid him in general, because he's gonna fuck up your shit. I've lost already 3 or 4 matches playing on manual as well, because I just got frozen first and I had no way of getting out. I do not have tier 2 Wasp, as you can see. I'm going to invest in her soon, but that's still a ways away. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and start that conversation, guys. And I've made a lot of videos kind of talking up how good he is, so I felt it was only fair to make one describing maybe in a small way how we can take him down a peg or two. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what your thoughts are. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.